Welcome to SHOWstudio's Reese series. I'm Georgina Evans, fashion editor of SHOWstudio, and I'm here with Hussein Chalayan in his studio in North London. Thank you so much for letting us invade your space.
Invade away, yes.
The Reese series lets us kind of unpick your latest collection, go into a little bit more depth. So really, really excited to talk about this collection because it was the one that milestoned your 25th anniversary, which is an incredible anniversary. But I want to start by taking you back, because it must feel like a while ago now.
Yes.
Taking you back to your starting point, because I know that the menswear and the pre-fall collections are under the same title, the same lexicon that you've been using. So is it the title that kind of influenced this collection to start with, or did you have the anniversary on the mind when you began? Well,
normally I react to the previous collection. So if I based it on a very, let's say, happy theme, it might be that I want the next one to be a reaction to that. Either, it could be a continuum of that too, but it's often, I sort of start with how I left off, if you know what I mean. And so the collections really evolve organically for me. So the title doesn't come always in the beginning. It comes kind of during the time I work on it, and it's an important part of what I do, but it's more of a gelling. The title helps me gel it in a way, but it varies. Sometimes it's in the beginning, sometimes it's during the collection process. But yes, the idea was that I would look at the techniques and themes that I've been working on throughout the years, because I am essentially quite a technique-orientated designer, but I also have ideas and I merge them. But the pattern cutting for me is really important. So we spend a lot of time in fittings. The fit, the body, the way things move is super important for me. Like I said, I said it many times really, most of my time is spent in fittings, and then drawings, and then draping and drawing, going back and forth. So I'd say that a lot of it was based on ideas I've explored for many, many years, but then this particular collection had obviously its own also personality.
Yeah, certainly. And actually it's interesting that you mentioned that you were kind of looking at pattern cutting from previous collections, because I spotted a few nods to previous collections. Yeah. And so these kind of I'm going to say characters, but they're certainly not.
The Bunraku agents.
Yes, I believe that's connected to your Spring Summer 11 collection with the Japanese influence, and at the time it was, I believe, totally correct me if I'm wrong, kind of commentary on the Western influence on Japan.
Yeah.
And here.
And the isolation of Japan. I did a whole thing on Japan, actually mostly based on the isolation of Japan and how Japan evolved through being isolated and the things they had to do to survive. That's what I was looking at. And the Bunraku agents, so Bunraku is a sort of Japanese puppetry where these agents are in the background doing things, and they're supposed to be invisible, but yet they're very visible. And I really like the fact that you really, really see them, but they kind of pretend not to be there. So I then started to use them to animate the clothes and do various things. In one show, I was in disguise as a waiter, and they were my helpers. So they would help. They would fill up the glasses, and I would offer a drink to the models, and then they did various things throughout. And we did a dance piece. I directed a dance piece at Saddle as well, and they were very present there as well. Yes. So it's an ongoing thing, and there was
a few nods.
A few nods there, and that's actually for me a very important collection, Sakoku, the one based on Japan. It was one of the first times I did another film before, in fact, with Nick Knight.
Yes.
We showed one of our collections as a film before, where we collaborated with Nick, and we didn't show any clothes except the film. This was in Paris, but this was the second time we showed as a film. But it was actually in a gallery setting where we showed the collection on a rail, and we showed the film that I, made with the clothes of the collection. And the reason why I did it was I wanted people to really look at the clothes, because I felt like you know, I was being called this kind of showman, and actually I'm spending most of my time making these clothes. And because I'm interested in the way they're presented, sometimes that took over, actually to my disadvantage in many ways. So this was a way of bringing back people to look at the clothes, and actually really helped. I did that twice with this one and the one after.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say there's that showmanship that might be your downfall, but actually I think it's that cherry on the cake, you know?
Well, that's how I see it, because I want it to be always a cultural experience for people.
Yeah.
But, you know, what used to happen, especially in the past, is before digital media, editors were able to really take your showpieces and make you look like you only do that.
Yeah.
And then you would be then known as an avant-garde designer. And then after the arrival of digital age, I think the whole thing became much more democratic, and our stuff wasn't being used, you know, to sell pages in papers or whatever it might be. It was me and Alexander McQueen. I think we were very much, you know, in the beginning, seen in this way, that we would do these avant-garde shows, but actually only a few % of the collection would be showpieces, and the rest would be completely wearable. And then you would be categorized as this avant-garde designer. I'm like thinking, actually, I spent like, you know, most of my time on the sleeve heads and on the collars of those jackets, and obsessively.
Yeah.
And then you get like a showpiece that takes over. And I think it's because of the choice of the editor. The editor, I think, in those days, the editors really had a control over the way you came across as a designer. I mean, they still do in a way, but the difference is now that through digital media, obviously everyone can see what you do even before you leave the venue of your show.
And I also spotted some of these lovely, I'm not going to be able to find them now, some really lovely hands that you had wrapping around the faces here. Yeah,
they were based on voguing. So the whole collection was based on Pretension, Georgina. So I really want to look at this idea, what it means to pretend, because it's a word that's thrown around a lot, where people don't, you know, often use it positively. If you're pretentious, obviously you're ingenuine, all of those things. And I thought, actually, if you think about all the things in our lives that transport us, they're based on pretension. If you look at actors, if you look at stories, if you look at films, they're all based on pretending, and they transport you. So, you know, whether they transport you to other worlds and hopefully, in a way, make you feel better.
Yeah.
So I thought of pretension actually as more of a creative force. So then I looked at these things that are typically seen as pretension, which is, you know, it's people like Kate Bush and people like maybe Brian Ferry, and I use those music, you know, and it's voguing, and it's, you know, voguing is like ultimately such a pretentious thing in a way, but it was so exciting. So the masks you're talking about were based on voguing, and I wanted these sort of disembodied voguers in a way. Yeah. So these hands came from nowhere, but yet they could have been the hands of the person. But I kind of wanted to create this, I guess, peculiarity.
Yes.
And then they also had makeup kits on them.
Yeah, the little Chalayan makeup brush.
So the idea was that the areas that were cut out would be for your makeup, so as if they create like the kit. So you can paint in your eyebrows, so to speak. So and yeah, they were quite exciting, to be honest, for me to work on. And then the Bunrak agents at the end were pretending to be the wind. You know, they were cut bigger than you would want to have them, so that you can actually animate them. Yeah. And I wanted this absurdity of the Bunrak agents to kind of, you know, run around the models, and then other times they'll be fanning the models, and so it was this kind of thing of actually humor is a big thing for me, but I like humor to the extent where it gets so absurd that I think a lot of the work I've done, which people have like written about, often has a sense of humor, but they get so absurd that they get also quite serious. So there's this bizarre space between absurdity, peculiarity, but also humor. So it's this kind of a nondescript space that I think I fall into. For sure.
I think that works really well with this phrase pretension as well, because it's about taking yourself seriously to the point of humor, to the point of kind of fast and jolly, and you're putting on such a front that you know that you've just gone so over the top that you're like, oh God, I've been over dramatized. I've over dramatized myself.
Yeah. And then I actually put a little dash calling it pretension.
Yes.
So, and then that's when you give something, when you pretension an entity, you give it strength while it's being made, like surfaces, you can pretension surfaces so that they resist. So it was also to turn the word pretension into something that was quite powerful, let's say. So, yeah, it was a really, really fun project to work on.
But I also want to talk about, you keep mentioning the word powerful, and I do think that's something that Chalayan does like no other, is have this power about it, really empowers women when they wear it. You get the feeling that anyone can put on this and it instantly a spark kind of lit within them. But also when I was reading the notes, this collection kind of plays commentary on these 16th century women who are a little bit, got a bit wayward or a little bit ill-behaved.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a nod to that as well. I love this.
With the corsetry.
With the corsetry and the slight kind of sexual undertones in the little suspendery hemlines.
So I guess it's that thing of, you know, I'm always interested in the roles of women and how women are used as scapegoat figures, I mean, throughout the whole time, and it still continues to do so. I think for me, it's a really interesting idea that you can maybe turn that round and make something that you're used, that's a scapegoat scenario into something that actually empowers you. So it was women of ill repute from the Shakespearean times. So I was looking at like images, I guess, of prostitutes, of whores, and what that meant really. And a lot of the time it wasn't even, it was of course terminology that men created for women, and also, you know, how easily a woman would be called those names. If a woman was a bit louder than normal, she would be very easily seen as loose, and all of these things. So also, you know, because I'm from Cyprus, and you know, it's a very male-dominated society, Turkish and Greek part of Cyprus, and all of that region. I think that I realized at an early age that I was really interested in women, and I wanted to work in something that really empowers women. So for me, a lot of these themes around feminism, etc., I think it's very much part of my being. I was raised by women, and for me, it's second nature. I mean, I can't even sort of separate it from myself. So I guess this is why I went into this line of work, that I wanted to do something to do with empowering women.
I also love this kind of hybrid of equestrian vibes that you get in the boots, and also I've picked up a little bit in the men's before, some of the kind of boots, and I love that idea of this pretentious, slight equestrian kind of showing off, because actually kind of horse riding is so elitist. It's at the top of, and this kind of, I just think it's so wonderful to have a nod to a 16th century whore with these lovely equestrian boots, and this odd duality of kind of a power play of elitist power, but also kind of women empowerment, and I love all these different ideas that come together. Yeah.
I think that this was kind of the point. I think you should have written my press release. I mean, I think that, you know, this is the point, that I am kind of someone that likes contradictions, and I like collecting thoughts that contradict each other. This is what my work has been about for many years, and I think I've worked on this really hard. That, you know, I guess I'm interested in how things relate to each other or how they don't relate to each other, and then I guess I try to make a new kind of image for the body through those clashes, and try to create some kind of harmony with it. But I think it's exactly what you said. I think it was about looking at this elitist idea of horse riding and being outdoors, and the great outdoors actually. I did a whole thing on that about 8-9 years ago for Puma. Basically, being outdoors in this country is an event as well. I mean, there's so many hobbies that surround it, and you know, this is very much a hobby island. So there's something very much about my upbringing here as well that affects me. Even though I was born in Cyprus, I was really raised here. So I think there's something about kind of being here but being slightly removed that also makes you an observer. So even though you're in it, because you have this sense of otherness, I'm from a Mediterranean setting.
Yeah.
I think it allows me to maybe look at things in a maybe bit more detached but yet involved way. So I think that really has an effect on my creative outlook.
Well, you mentioned before that frustrated you how the collections often get misunderstood because it was so about the pattern cutting and so about how much time you spent in with the fittings and going through. So looking at this collection, is there anything that you'd want to pull out and specifically show me and say this took bloody hours to make, or this was a nightmare? Or
yeah, there is a lot of things there. So for a start, I mean, the skirt of this
yes.
of this look here, that's a very specific kind of cutting that we started doing when I first came back to London after Paris. So that's about 2 years ago. Our first winter collection, we started kind of cut these circular shapes that would collapse with a seam in between. And we started working on it then, and then this was like kind of taking it a lot further. I didn't do it on skirts at that time. And then this idea of things that are very constructed that then melt, and then but they're still very bodycon. So the idea of something that starts with the body and then comes out and then comes back in again. So these drapes here, for instance,
beautiful.
They're all corseted underneath.
Yes.
And then there was these were also pieces that were cut in one with the corset kind of integrated,
yeah.
but kind of also, let's say, kind of blown out, but then done in such a way that you can still get them to be close to the body, but we like to show them away from the body. So I think constantly there's this interplay between something being very strict and being very loose, and then using something very strict, but also in a very relaxed way.
Yeah. That's lovely.
And these pieces here, for instance.
I love these too.
And then they were like these, again, it's like a corset that you can wear normally, but in the show, just liked it, again, coming off from the body.
Yeah.
And I guess it's also this interplay between the past and present constantly of clothing, not just our past and present, but of how we perceive clothes. I mean, I'm interested in this as well. Like, what does it mean? How does a modern woman dress now, but still make a reference to the past? So, you know, like even when I look at history, I think for me it's very important that it doesn't look like costume, because I think very easily it can become that. And I mean, even first show in Paris, Medea, it's called. It's all about layering different eras and then cutting them away. And you actually saw the cut lines on a jacket. You'd see another jacket layered on top and cut away. Yeah. And so I've been interested in this sort of way of looking at history, but and how I could make it contemporary.
I think that's a lovely note to end on, actually. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And congratulations again on a lovely collection.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing the next one.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.